Cool. This is awesome. I could do this all evening. Feels good. If anybody wants this experience, just stand up and come by. So welcome to this first IOTA meetup, which we host here at grandcentrix. I'm Ralf. I'm one of the two founders and the managing partner at grandcentrix, and I take care for technology, which means that I'm the most terrible developer we've got. I'm really terrible at developing, but I try to identify technologies which drive grandcentrix and our customers forward. And I have the easiest part tonight because I give you like a little bit of housekeeping and then 10 seconds of what grandcentrix actually is. This might be the boring part for you, but we have to do it. I have been asked to do it, and I rush you through that, and then we hand it over to Nuriel, and when Nuriel is done, we hand it over to Dominik to give you an update on all things IOTA. So a little bit of housekeeping, which is important. We are streaming and recording this, so you might appear on social media. If you don't want to appear on social media, you got to leave the room, because chances are we will have you on videotape. And also in the Q&A, we might zoom into you. I know that some people don't want to be posted, but you will be broadcasted very likely. Then we have a catch box. So we have a huge internet audience watching, and we will have a microphone which we throw to you. Try to catch it and speak into the microphone when asking questions. It's not that we can't hear you, it's that we have to have everybody out there on the internet being able to follow up your questions. If you post, please use those hashtags, which makes it easy for us afterwards to find the tweets and whatever you say out there. Hugely recommended. The IOTA community is on Discord. We have been on Slack and elsewhere. It has recently transitioned to Discord, which is like Slack on steroids, honestly. Follow this bit.ly and join the IOTA community. It's a great community. It's like thousands of daily actives. It has a huge German section too. So there's an entire section in the IOTA community where you will only find people from around Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. And you got to join it. It's free. It has great mobile applications. You can stay connected to the founders, to everybody in the community if you join Discord. This is probably personally the most important point for me tonight. We will have an Ask Me Anything. And what I found in various other meetings, IOTA is also a cryptocurrency, and we understand that. But tonight it's not about speculation, it's not about fear, uncertainty, and doubt, it's not about investment advice. We can't give it to you, we don't want to give it to you, and we should focus it on real-world adoption, on the technology, on use cases. So I would love if we can keep the conversation in that area. And we appreciate free speech, we will not moderate it out, but try to stay focused on the technology. It makes it easier for everyone. If you want to catch up with me, I'm Ralf on Twitter. Also, I'm Ralf everywhere. Tend to be Ralf everywhere. Follow me on Twitter if you want to catch up. If you want to present on one of our upcoming meetings, just get in touch. And it's the easiest way to grab me. I can't catch up with email. Probably something we share, Dominik. You get like 5,000 emails a day. It's tough. A little bit about grandcentrix. This is probably everything you need to know. We have been in the Internet of Things space since our incorporation 9 years ago. And we do nothing else. We only do Internet of Things productions and smart products. And what does that mean? And I really give you the 10-second overview. We build products. And that means things, electronics, hardware, embedded firmware, clouds, data analytics, and everything else you need when you tackle machine-to-machine, machine-to-machine to humans, and machine-to-human communication. We also do the security part and the ideation. We take it from prototype to mass manufacturing. That's all we do. We do nothing else. And if you translate that into services, that's cloud architecture, cloud development, and system integration. And we also do outsourced operation of those IoT platforms because many of our customers want to then have somebody maintain the day-to-day operation. And on the hardware side, we focus on gateways, sensors, and custom hardware. And in that space, we only focus on the secure connectivity part. So we don't deal with like the lower level hardware integration. That is the domain of our customers. But once devices need to talk, that's when we come in. If you aggregate that up one more level, it's outsourced agile product development. And if you aggregate that one more time, we are like 150 full-time architects, engineers, designers, and 2/3 are sitting here in Cologne, and 1/3 is in Dortmund. And that's everything about grandcentrix for tonight. But I had to guess it. We're also hiring. Chantal told me I have to say we are also hiring, so if you want to get hired, are unhappy with whatever you do today, just approach any of us. We should be easily to find around. And that's it for me. My part is over, and I hand it over to Nuriel, but I have to, who's Nuriel and why do we have the fish there? I had to put it in, Nuriel. Nuriel, it's probably Nuriel's, we have to say thank you to Nuriel because he helped like thousands of full node operators. The IOTA network needs nodes, and those nodes need to be set up and operated by the community. And Nuriel has provided an automated deployment based on Ansible, and he helped like literally thousands of people setting up nodes and taking people new to IOTA through the process and made it really simple. It's easy, even if you're not that seasoned with like Linux operating systems, to set up a node. And actually, Nuriel has this fish as his avatar in the Discord community. The IOTA Foundation refers to him as a fish guy. And I asked, he's from Amsterdam, I asked him whether I can name him the fish guy. His name is Nuriel. He had a bartender school before he jumped into IT, so all of his life was about teaching, and that's what he does in the community. And he will talk about what it means to pragmatically approach infrastructure deployments. And thank you, Nuriel. You helped me setting up our first nodes, and I hand it over to you now. Give a warm welcome to Nuriel, please. I have to. This one, I can up your presentation. Let me see. This is PowerPoint. I don't know how to present this. Man. Somebody familiar with PowerPoint? Do you know how to start a PowerPoint presentation? We don't use this tool.
Double click. You
got to teach me. Thanks. Sorry.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here for the talk. This is my first presentation talking about this stuff. As Ralf mentioned, I had a bartending school in the past, and that's a totally different topic about cocktails and mixing, so I'm going to get the hang of it after tonight. So, anybody here has a full node, the IOTA full node, actually? I know. Okay. So I'll try to describe very quickly and very roughly what an IOTA full node is, and actually what I've done, the automation, and why it's so great and why so many users can actually have a full node nowadays, because a full node can best be run on a Linux operating system, and I'm a Linux guy. That's what I do. And let me first, that works. I'm a DevOps and IOTA community member. You can find me on Twitter with this handle or a Discord channel. And I work for Jexia as a cloud infrastructure engineer. And Jexia actually provides a platform for developers on which they can develop further and helps them with a lot of tooling. And it's a great thing, so I urge you to check it out, Jexia. And the reason that a lot of the ideas that I brought into the IOTA community are based on things that I work on daily at Jexia with the infrastructure. We have a quite complex infrastructure, and which involves a lot of components, and actually a lot of ideas I got which I could implement into the IOTA community, and more specifically for the full nodes. Let's talk about the full node quickly. So I'm not sure if all of you know what the full node does. Ralf mentioned that quickly, that the full node in the IOTA network is actually the very important part, because that's what makes up from the entire IOTA network. And a full node, from a DevOps perspective, includes things like installing the node, security precautions you need to take, deployment automation, and load balancing, which this is a subject we're going to touch today. This is approximately what we're going to try to talk about today, and I'll try to get into. So what is the IOTA full node? The IOTA full node gets connections from other IOTA full nodes. You must connect your IOTA full node to other full nodes, and you need to configure the system. You need to ensure its uptime. You need to ensure its security, monitoring and alerting and logging, maintenance and updates. Every now and then we get new versions of the IOTA full node and we need to update, so it's very important to do that So this is very roughly, for example, your full node. And I know that most people that get full nodes, they take a virtual private server in the data center. And clients connect to your full node using the API port, which is considered a public node the moment the clients can connect to it. So when you get to the installation phase of the IOTA node, this is mostly, I think, for somebody who is not used to Linux, can be quite a complex thing. So you start with all kind of compilation commands. You go on to the social. So don't let me get you scared. It's not that difficult to install a full node. It actually took me half an hour following the instructions, but I don't expect from somebody who wants to have his full node nowadays to manage to get it done in half an hour. So that's why I came up with the automation. And in addition, we have the security considerations, because if you just use a Linux system, you might know that it's very important to secure it. You have your system which is exposed to public internet, and there are a lot of things that if you haven't been using Linux, you should take into account. For example, the server access. You use SSH to connect to your server. How do you secure that? How do you roll on updates? How do you do denial of service protection for the service? System security, that's, for example, also updating packages on the Linux system. Logging, which can help you see if anybody's trying to brute force your server. And monitoring, which can tell you a lot about the performance of your server. That's where the IRI Playbook. Does anybody know about Ansible? Ever heard about Ansible? Puppet? Chef? This is a whole family of tools which help you run a deployment. So if you take a bare Linux server, you can run a set of instructions on it, and these instructions are going to fully deploy the server with the functionality you want. In our case, we're talking about the full node, and it's not only about the full node software, you also have a lot of add-ons around it, which is the monitoring, the logging, the security. What the playbook does is allow anybody with one command line to install the full node, which includes all those add-ons. And I added here the link for the playbook. It also includes a lot of documentation. So, like, what do the firewalls do? How do I open a firewall? How do I close a firewall? How do I secure my server better? For example, with SSH, how to disable root access. You don't want to have root access, for example, or only use SSH keys. So, in a nutshell, what the playbook can do is a fully automated installation of the IOTA node, system configuration, and we have some nice, I've included some nice add-ons there, which are actually community developments. You can check the links from Chris Holiday and Roman Semko. They develop very nice features that you can add on to your IOTA full node, which helps, for example, Nelson helps your node to make automatic connection to your neighbors. Because normally you need to find your neighbors manually. You need to log into the Discord channel and say like, hi guys, I have a node. I'm looking for neighbors. So all of this can be automated. Chris Holiday created very nice graphings and monitorings of your node, which tells you a lot about the performance. And updates. I added recently a configuration utility. So once you install your node, you have a nice menu-driven utility which helps you to configure your node. And one very important feature about Ansible, it can actually deploy many servers in parallel. So it's not only about your one single node, you can actually deploy thousands of servers in parallel. So suppose you're in infrastructure and you have a need to have a lot of servers in your infrastructure, you can deploy them all at once. So this is a very nice feature here. Sorry. So, I think pretty much the reason why I was invited was for the bigger picture. This is a blog I wrote some time ago about how I would perceive the deployment in an infrastructure. It's nice, people have their reasons to have a full node. And that can be from various reasons. That can be, for example, you want to help the network, you want to have your own node to which you can connect and process transactions. But suppose you're in infrastructure and you have tens of thousands of sensors and you want all of them to connect to some full node in order to process their data. So that's going to be complicated if you use only one node, so you probably want to use multiple nodes. So there are a few problems that are going to be in this situation. You have 10,000s of sensors, you have hundreds of nodes. How do you tell the sensors to which node to connect to? So you might choose to tell all your sensors to hold a list of all the full nodes, but that's going to be a little bit difficult to maintain. For example, suppose your nodes are going under maintenance. Suppose you have some full nodes which are not healthy. So you need to keep and maintain a list of the full nodes at all times, which is going to be difficult in this scenario. Sorry. So as you can see, our blue birdie has no idea how to connect all the clients to the full nodes. This can be the clients, it can be sensors, cards, drones, and they don't know how to connect or to which node to connect to. And that's where the concept of automated load balancing comes in. And how many of you have heard of a load balancer? Okay, so I'll try to roughly describe what the load balancer does. The load balancer is going to be situated in between the client and in between the full node. What it does, it proxies traffic from the client to the full nodes, and actually doing it in a load balancing way. So it doesn't traffic everything to one full node. It's actually going to choose to which full node to send the traffic to. And in the infrastructure, what's nice about the load balancer, you can also apply security policies. For example, rate limiting, and it intelligently can decide to which full node to send the data to. And we're talking now about the load balancer, a lot of clients, and a lot of sensors, but it's not one single load balancer, because if you're going to use one single load balancer, that introduces a single point of failure. And if you lose your load balancer, you're actually losing connectivity to your entire infrastructure. So we probably need to think of a solution here, which comes in the form of multiple load balancers. So that introduces some new problems. So if we look over here, we can see the players that I'll describe in such an infrastructure to try to provide a solution to this. As you can see, we have our monitoring, we have our client, we have our load balancer full node, we have the playbook, which is going to deploy our infrastructure. And I introduce here a new component, service discovery. Has anybody ever heard of console? One person, two, three. Okay, don't be shy. Console is a service discovery, and it's always very important because, as I mentioned, the load balancer, you cannot have a single one. You need to have multiple load balancers, and you have a lot of full nodes. How do we bring this thing together? As we said, we have our full nodes, we have our load balancer, and we have our clients. We have a service discovery in between the full nodes and the load balancer. Whenever you deploy a new full node to your infrastructure, you let the full node to register itself in the service discovery, and the load balancers are actually reading their configuration from the service discovery. Now the service discovery does something nice. You register your full node there, and it starts running periodic health checks towards the full node. So whenever the full node goes down for maintenance, the service discovery tells the load balancer, you can't use this full node anymore. So this is very intelligent automation if you look at the entire picture, because all of these things happen automatically. The registry, the scaling up of the environment, and so forth. I think I went backwards. So to try to show the entire idea, I'll try to explain it from the right. We have our full nodes on the right. We have our service discovery. So I deploy a new full node. The full node registers in the service discovery, and the service discovery starts running health check towards the full node. The moment the full node is healthy, it makes it available for the load balancers. So the load balancers are actually reading all their configuration of available full nodes from the service discovery. Now you'll notice that I put here a few load balancers, and each one has an IP addresses. Indeed, those are internal private range IPs, but it's for to provide the example. So now you'd wonder, how does the client know to which load balancer to connect to? So here we use the DNS, domain name service. I think everyone knows it and uses it daily, obviously. When you connect to Google, you're actually querying a domain name service to know what is the IP address. The DNS can actually return a list of IP addresses under one domain. So let's give our cluster a name, call it mycluster.io. So whenever the client is contacting mycluster.io, is actually receiving this list of IPs back, and is going to try to access the first one, the next one, and this, by the way, is also load balanced by the DNS. It returns every time the different order. In that way, you as the client, all you have to care about is connecting to one single domain. I've written a proof of concept on the blog. I hope that we can provide those slides after, Ralf. And we'll have some links so you can read about the proof of concept. And if you are a more Linux person and you'd like to try it out, you can actually give it a try. There is a few instructions how to set this environment up locally. And you can give it a try and have maybe a full node or two. And I think that this is pretty much it. So if you have...
Thanks. Thanks, Nuriel. And it's a testament to the IOTA community, what you've done. I mean, it's just, this is all very smoothly presented, but I know that it was days and nights of work, and we run 12 full nodes, pretty big ones. We service roughly 15 million API requests per day, and it's all behind infrastructure using your scripts and configuration and playbooks. It's great. We open it up for questions. I believe we need the catch box now, if we have questions. Don't throw it. I'm not a good catcher. Will you throw it, or? Yeah, we have it. We have questions for Nuriel. We can also have another Q&A round at the end. Anybody got questions for Nuriel? Anybody wants to run a full node? I think you were pretty good in carrying the concept.
Okay, thank you.
Nuriel will be around, and he's also Nuriel77 on Discord and on Twitter and everywhere. I think my next guest needs no introduction. It's Dominik, obviously one of the founders of IOTA, and Dominik, you gotta grab the microphone and give a warm welcome to Dominik.
By the way, should we do the presentation?
Oh, sorry. PowerPoint monster.
Where's this?
We are not used. We are Mac users. No, we gotta.
All right, cool. Hello, everyone. So as you can hear by my voice, I'm kind of sick because Germany is fucking cold right now. So that sucks. But so first of all, thanks a lot for grandcentrix for hosting this. I think this will probably be the most professional meetup ever. I think we have like 4K cameras, pizzas, and everything. So that's good, right? and thanks to Nuriel for coming and hosting this presentation. So people always ask, like, what's the best way to contribute if you're not a coder, right? And so hosting a full node is definitely the best way to contribute and participate, right? And I think that also gets us into the main purpose of this meetup. It's really about community. So don't expect an announcement that the central bank is going to use IOTA or something. It's more humble than that, right? It's the main purpose of this meetup is to give a more general update what we've been kind of doing, because for the last few months most of the IOTA Foundation members have been like super swamped with work, focused on getting shit done. And so this is more about the general update on where we stand with the foundation, ecosystem, the tech itself, and then afterwards, okay, that's kind of a placeholder. That's not supposed to be there. And then afterwards, we can host a Q&A. So someone here asked also like what goes into the Q&A, the AMA. So you can really ask me anything, as long as it's not some price speculation stuff. So let's jump into it. So let's start with the foundation, where we stand. So I think in November of last year, we announced the foundation. So that's now 4 months away. It took us more than a year to register the foundation. And I can tell you the registration was a tiring process, and what came after that was even more tiring. And so the hard reality that we face is that we are no longer a startup, right? So we are not that 10 to 15 people group. We're not a startup. We don't have to just focus on one market. We are really a regulated entity now. And that means there's a lot of problems that come with it. And what makes us even worse is that we're not just a regulated entity, like we could just be a Stiftung, right? Like that would be such an easy life. But we're not just a Stiftung, right? We are operating in this very fierce and fast-moving environment, which is like this whole blockchain community. And there's just so much shit happening all the time. And that brings us to the challenges, right? So what kind of challenges do we face as founders, and what challenges do we face as a team growing this up as an ecosystem? Because I think for most of you also, like, these challenges are put away, right? Like we don't tell you, like I have these problems today, how can you help me? And so let's look into what those challenges actually are. So the first one is really like setting up the foundation as a regulated entity. And there's a lot of problems that come with that, because at the end of the day, we are a regulated entity, right? So that means we could actually lose our non-profit status at any point in time if we're doing shady stuff, which means that every step, every decision, every contract that we sign has to be calculated and make sure that we don't do something wrong, right? So that's the first problem. Now, the second problem is that we don't just want to be hindered by this bureaucracy, right? I fucking hate paper documents, but at this point we are in this bureaucratic nightmare, which means that even though we are in this bureaucratic nightmare, we still need to scale, we still need to grow as fast as possible. Because at the end of the day, we are growing exponentially, right? And there's just so much demand coming from all fronts, which means that we need to hire, and we need to hire internationally. So that's the second problem. Now, the third problem is obviously we need to grow with our partnerships outwards. First and foremost, really for adoption reasons and awareness, and secondly, really also to really make sure that we get the right partners on board that can also help us solve our current problems. So you might have seen that Volkswagen recently announced our closer collaboration with them at Bosch Connected World. That's just one example, right? Like we've interfaced with hundreds of companies at this point, which is not just like big corporates, but it's also startups and other entities like NGOs and so on and so forth. And other than that, the other big stakeholder in our project is really the community, because the community is what makes this a permissionless ecosystem. We don't just want this to be some corporate coin, right? It's kind of boring. We really want this to be an ecosystem where anyone can start participating, where anyone can start innovating. And that also means that we need to really take care of this community and make sure that they're engaged. And also that the community is growing by us doing these meetups like we're doing today, or going to conferences and traveling around the world. And now we don't just have a community of lovers, right? We also have a community of haters. and the community of haters is like the biggest headache, right? Because they are the ones that really get us away from being able to focus on just the current problems. They're the ones that are causing new problems. So you need to suddenly like completely reshift your focus and start on solving those problems and actually communicating and being transparent and so on and so forth, and saying, hey, like your points about why IOTA doesn't work are wrong, which need to be properly articulated and so on and so forth. It's a huge pain, but it's part of the game. And the other thing is obviously we need to improve the base technology itself. We can't just do these things. We also need to develop hardcore shit, right? And also do research. And it's just really difficult if you're constantly being faced and pulled into all directions. And the last point is obviously we're in a very harsh and very volatile market. So one day you wake up and you lose like $20, $30 million, and just like, yeah. So this is the environment we're in, right? So nothing is certain, everything is uncertain. You don't know where you're going, you don't know where you stand. And it's the basic summary, I think. So these are the challenges that we face, just so you guys know where we are kind of coming from and what we've been focused on. But at the end of the day, it's like a lot of fun, right? And me and David always joke like it's impossible to live a normal life at this point because it's a lot of fun just solving those challenges. And like the point is like there's a high failure rate, there's a high potential for failure, there's a high potential for success. And if we succeed, it's going to be the biggest success story ever. And so there's a high incentive to like just dedicate your entire life for this. And which is what basically everyone at the foundation and also like a lot of community members have done, like really dedicated towards the mission that we set forth. So what have we been working on the foundation side? So the main focus for over the last few months was to really set up the foundation as a proper organization, which means that first and foremost you need to get a bank account, right? People need to get salaries. And it took us like 2 months to get a bank account because who would have thought that even as a regulated entity it's impossible to find a bank? You know, typical stuff, because of compliance reasons, we can't work with a cryptocurrency. And so it took us some time to find a bank account, but it worked out. And the new bank that we have, which is one of the largest, like a huge fan, so they're being very supportive. And other than that, we always need to resolve liquidity issues, which means, hey, we need to start having money in our bank account. And more equally important to that, the entire back office infrastructure, like payroll and stuff like that. Really, really boring stuff that just has to be set up, like just having a framework. Because the thing is, this needs to be like a well-run engine, right? You just need to make sure, like, as soon as you hire someone, that they get on a payroll, that they get paid. And we need to first set up that framework, and that just takes so much time, right? It's just a pain. And then other than that, the team obviously grew a lot over the last few months. And so at this point, we're more than 40 people, which means that there was 40 people without any employment contracts, 40 people that were just really dedicated to quit their jobs and work with us even without a salary. And now we are working on actually getting those 40 people on board, which means we need to get employment contracts for 40 people all around the globe. That's also a pain, but it has to be done. And other than that, what's probably most important as well is to have proper rules of procedures. Because the thing is, we are now, like I said, we are a regulated entity, which means that every decision that is being made has to be properly documented and in an audible fashion, right? We need to say, like, we made this decision because of this and that, write a fucking document about it, put it in a folder. Because at the end of the day, we need to make sure that if there's a regulator coming, that we have everything there, right? And that's also like a very, very tiring process for someone like me and David. Because like I said, we hate paper documents and processes, but you have to go through with it. And other than that, what's very important for us is also this whole governance structure for the foundation itself. Because so far the team, because it was so small and like it was like people focused on higher outputs, right? It was like a team of 10 to 15 people that really got most of the work done. And now we've suddenly scaled to 40 to 50 people, which means now we need to start having proper processes in place, code of conducts, and so on and so forth, which is why this internal governance structure is something that we've been really focused on and are still focusing on to really figure out how we are going to do this. We don't want this to be some hierarchical stuff, right? It has to be really focused on being agile and innovative and being able to respond quickly to sudden market changes. But other than that, it's also about interfacing with the community itself. We would, like for example, the IEN, and stuff like that. And I think the main difficulty about the IOTA Foundation is, many of you know, so that JJ joined the IOTA Foundation supervisory board. We were getting some other people in the supervisory board of directors, and advisory board. But the difficulty here becomes now, how do you represent the entire ecosystem in the foundation, right? It shouldn't just be big corporates, it should also be NGOs, it should also be startups and individuals and so on and so forth. And we've been trying to think about how could such a governance structure look like. And it's kind of difficult, right? But it's work in progress. And we have some really good experts here that are advising us on that. So you can definitely expect some good announcements, updates on the governance structure itself, and also how you as an individual can start participating in the foundation. And lastly, transparency, right? We don't want this to be a black box. It should really be a very transparent foundation where people really know where do we currently stand and what does the roadmap look like, what are the challenges and stuff like that. And to be honest, so far we've been simply too busy to communicate too much, simply because we've been swamped and really focused on getting the foundational layer right, this framework. But now we will really work on getting all of this out in a very transparent manner. So let's talk about the ecosystem. So first of all, the Ecosystem Development Fund. Same as the IOTA Foundation, the Ecosystem Development Fund is something legal and regulated, right? We need to pay out these grants in a legal way, in an audible fashion, because at the end of the day, those tokens are money at this point. It's not just some play money, it's not some monopoly money, right? It's tokens with actual it's a regulated token, right? So we need to make sure that all of this is properly done, which is why we've been engaged with a few law firms at this point. Oh, by the way, one point. What we've been working on, a lot of lawyer meetings. And so that's also a basic summary of all of this here. Exactly, so the ecosystem fund. So we've been engaging with a few law firms that are now helping us out to set up the ecosystem fund in a proper fashion. Because I think this is now like $40 or $50 million, which have to be first transferred to the IOTA Foundation. And then we need to have proper procedures set up on how we can actually issue these funds globally. But it's looking very good at this point. And I think John said that the ecosystem fund is going to be ready in March. And we are still looking good for that. So that's great. So if you want to apply to the ecosystem fund by just building some proof of concept library or tools or whatever, you should already now prepare for that so that you can start collecting ASAP and start participating in the ecosystem. So one thing that really sucked over the last few months is probably the documentation. Like, it's terrible, right? And so we've now been working also together with Ralf and others, the community members, really get some proper documentation set up, because the focus of 2018 is to really make the entire system production ready. That means that first of all we have proper enterprise ready software, but also equally important, like properly documented software, so that people can easily understand, hey, like, what does this do and how can I actually install it? And so if you want to check out the new documentation, you can go to docs.iota.org. There's also some cool Tangle visualization there, if you want to have like a good night's sleep visualization. And so equally important to the documentation is really like how can you make it super easy for a developer to start innovating. And I don't want to go against Nuriel, but you don't want to set up a full node, right? You just want to have an API call and just start building a prototype. And so we've been working on setting up the new sandbox environment. We now kind of call it POW, POBox. I don't know how to pronounce it actually. POW box, POBox, whatever. But the main point of this is that now we take care of all of the hard stuff, which means full node hosting, load balancing, and also proof of work, which is required to send a transaction. So now all you essentially have to do is send an API call to the sandbox itself, and then you're already engaging and interacting with the network. And this is obviously mainly just for prototyping, right? You should be able to build this a super simple IOTA application by utilizing the sandbox. So that can already be used today. So if you want to start building applications, just go to this link and then you can start building stuff. And this goes hand in hand with the ecosystem fund, right? Probably the most important thing that we've been working on is the Trinity Wallet. Because apparently the previous wallet that I helped build is shitty. I agree. So don't worry, no hard feelings. And so the Trinity Wallet is being developed by I think 5 or 6 people at this point, and it's going really well. So on mobile we are already in alpha testing with nearly 300 testers. I think the reviews recently on the new iOS and Android version are really good. And the desktop version is also going to be ready for alpha testing soon. Sorry. So the goal is to really have the Trinity Wallet ready for beta testing within 5 to 6 weeks. And this means beta testing with the security audit already underway. So now that the alpha testing is close to being finished, we are now engaging with the security auditor to review the entire code and give their stamp of approval that this can really go out. Because this really has to be not just the best looking and the best working wallet, but also the most secure, right? And especially after the seed theft, it's apparent that there's a huge UX problem that has to be solved by making everything easier, which means like optimizing the proof of work on your mobile phone so that you can actually do a transaction from your phone directly, doing all of the background handling and automation, like no longer reattachments and stuff like that. And like I said, it's 5 to 6 weeks away from beta. So stay tuned. So let's talk about manual claims and reclaims, which is like probably the most, one of the most important things that has clouded us over the last few months. So first of all, the manual claims, many of you don't know those probably, but those are from the first batch, which was like from early 2016, I think. Those are completely processed right now, so that's good. One less headache. And the second thing about the reclaims, which is from the key reuse problem from November last year, I think, we've already processed 5 batches so far. So that's like nearly 300 TI that have been processed and have been given back to the users. And the biggest problem that we saw is that some people, first of all, they claimed multiple times to different seats, which now means, hey, like there's an ownership problem. Who actually owns those seats? Who owns the money? And as you know, we are a regulated entity. We can't do shady stuff. So now the question becomes like, who should you send the money to? And now suddenly we were faced with this hard decision to no longer pay out those payouts, those reclaims. And they said, say, hey, we need to go through a legally vetted KYC process. And right now we are engaging with a law firm to actually help us set up this process so that it's legally vetted and we can make sure that we won't get into any trouble. And the ETA for that is by mid-March that we are able to continue with that and hopefully finish the reclaims as soon as possible. So in total, I think like 2/3 have been processed so far, so that's good. And the seed theft. And so the seed theft, so we've been actively working with the German and Japanese police. So those are the two that we know of that got engaged. So Cohen from the team, who is our cybersecurity expert from Atos, has been really working actively with the police to make sure that we get to the bottom of this and hopefully even recover some of the funds, right? So we've been working on tracking all of the transactions by coding a tool to make sure that we can track this through the network and figure out like maybe even some of those transactions went to an exchange and so on and so forth. And we hope that there is going to be some updates to that very soon. And hopefully we can get to the bottom of it. So some other updates as a closing remarks to the website. That's also coming in March, so we've been making some really good progress on that. So it's looking quite sexy. I can't show a preview, obviously. Sorry. So the website is coming up. There will also be a team page, an ecosystem fund, and stuff like that. And what we want to do with the website is to really showcase these cyber physical systems. And so I think you can get what I mean with that. It's going to be cool. And the other stuff is the new IOTA core architecture. Because we've been too busy over the last few months, we weren't able to continue in C++ or Rust. And what we've been thinking about is figuring out a complete new architecture that we can utilize to actually make this enterprise ready, right? And so we're starting to engage with some other third parties that can be involved to actually help us accelerate this. Because the thing that's obvious is that at this point, what we should focus on first and foremost is really also new developments that extend the ability of the IOTA core and engage with true experts in embedded to help us really make sure that this is enterprise ready and can be utilized in production systems. Yeah. And so the data marketplace is also going well. So we've been working quite well with the bigger companies, doing workshops and stuff like that. And now that the ecosystem fund is set up and the sandbox is ready, we are also going to open up the API. So the API has been ready for about 4 weeks now, but we didn't want to publish it yet, simply because there was no point in doing that. And so we are now also starting to do more about the data marketplace and also are onboarding more companies now that really want to participate in this innovation exercise. So I think that was overall it from my side.
Dominik, thank you. That was a lot, and I guess you need some water.
Cool.
Before we go into the Q&A. And thanks for doing it, even though your voice is obviously...
I'm cool.
Yeah, it's cool outside. So this is a lot, and it's interesting. When I first met Dominik, I overlooked what it means to build a company while doing all of the rest. And he we grew grandcentrix from 0 to 150 over the course of 8 years. He's growing a company from 0 to I don't know what the end will be, but to 40 plus over the course of 12 minutes. And you have to set it all up properly, and there's a community. I mean, there are 12,000 daily active community folks who are still writing to dom@iota.org and expecting a response within like 10 minutes, which doesn't happen, can't happen. So it's an amazing journey you've taken, Dominik. But with that said, we open it up for questions. So who wants to be? So do I have to throw it, or do you want to throw it?
I can't throw it.
I can try.
I will be embarrassed.
Who wants to be first? You will be embarrassed. Yeah. Wait for me. We have to be the first. You got to speak into the microphone.
This is it. Okay.
And you got to say your name and.
Yeah, my name is Till Hoppe from Dortmund, and I'm interested in the IoT and in smart contracts, which will be possibility, or which will bring new possibilities for us in our team using IOTA. Can you give us a short summary of smart contracts in IOTA?
I knew this was coming.
Me too. ERC20 coins.
ERC20, yeah. So obviously, what we focus on is to build protocols that do one thing and do one thing really well, right? And so what IOTA is going to do forever is transaction settlement. So transaction settlement meaning how can you most efficiently send money from A to B, right, machine to machine. But now with the foundation, obviously the purpose of the foundation is not just to build one protocol or manage one protocol, but to build up a variety of protocols that enable this vision of a machine economy. Which means obviously transaction settlement is one component of those, digital identities is another. So we are already starting to think about more thoroughly how can we actually build an identity protocol for machines. And smart contracts is definitely a component that is also very interesting for machine economy, right? To automate those processes. And so we are right now thinking about various ways to enable this. So for one, there's this interoperability that we want to enable with other blockchain technologies. So one of the goals of 2018 for us at least is to also build up a larger case study with bigger companies, so meaning 3 or 4 bigger companies, where we combine different technologies like IOTA with Hyperledger or IOTA with Ethereum to actually check out, hey, like what should such a system architecture look like and what does it enable? But there's also different ways to enable smart contracts that we're looking at. Yeah. Can't say more.
Who else? I bring it to you. I can't throw it far. Go ahead.
Thanks. My name is Philip Schaefer. Actually, I have a couple of questions concerning the protocol.
Yep.
I read the white paper, and these might be kind of specific questions, but I'm trying anyway. First of all, as far as I understood, you can use keys only once, or you should use keys only once.
Yeah.
So whenever I have a public address, and I used that key, what happens to funds that are sent to that public address after that address has been used?
So the main point is that once you utilize your signature, you're basically revealing some of the details of your private key. And that means that if you continuously reuse your private key, that means that the probability of someone being able to forge your signature decreases, right? So that means that someone with a normal computer can start cracking like forging your private key and start getting your signature, being able to spend the tokens. So for example, if you send now funds to this address, and an adversary, right, an attacker with a lot of computation power is probably able to crack or forge your signature and able to spend the tokens. So now that means that you're at the race with the attacker, right? Now you need to be able to spend the tokens first.
So what happens when I use a private key? Then usually my transaction is split into, well, the transaction I really want to do and the transaction to a new address that is produced out of my seed.
Yeah.
And the first private key, first address is abandoned or not used anymore. Yeah. But the question is now, if someone sends funds to that old address, what happens to those funds? They are, they are stored in that old address, aren't they?
Yeah.
And now, that discussion that came up with Next Web.
Yeah.
Ralf wrote something about, well, nothing can happen there because there are no funds in a used address anymore. But once an old address receives new funds, do I have a problem of double spend then? I mean, can a message that has been used before, can that be reattached? And now that that address has new funds, will be executed?
Well, you asked, I responded to what the Next Web reported.
Yeah,
and
but that's how I came
to what
up
they
with the
did
whole
not
idea.
get right.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, this signature scheme is in place to keep IOTA quantum immune. Because in a quantum computing age, which we might see, cryptography as we apply it today might become insecure.
Mm-hmm.
That's the primary reason for that design decision. It's a great and groundbreaking decision. It introduces some new problems.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're talking about is that you can only spend from an address once. If you spend from that address again, it makes your private, it doesn't make the private key more insecure. There's an intermediate layer, but that's details. And what I wrote and that is the simple fact that shouldn't happen. And all the participants in IOTA networks make sure that doesn't happen. But you were asking, what if it happens, if it still happens, if somebody transfers funds to an address which already has been spent. There are ways around it, and we can discuss about that later. Essentially, you can top off that address and then reattach the bundle and replay the bundle. And if you're faster, the address will be cleared out eventually, but it still stays a race between somebody who potentially tries to crack your private address versus you potentially trying to push your new transaction through the network. It is as simple as it is. And I know this comes up a lot about when you talk about donation addresses.
Yeah.
Because you somehow have to rotate donation addresses, because if people keep sending funds there, once you cash out to some other address, the money is at risk when you spend twice, and every participant in the IOTA network should know about it. The wallets prevent it. There are API methods on the node side which allow you to ask whether a destination address has already been spent from. And actually, even the shitty wallet, Dominik, which you initially contributed, checks destination addresses. And if you send to an address which already has been spent from, the exact thing you're describing, the wallet says, well, you can't send funds to that address because you already spent from that destination or somebody else. It is an aspect of the protocol. You got to use it right. And these one-time signatures introduce that problem, but they do it to stay quantum immune and make IOTA more secure on the long run.
And I mean, the new wallets are just basically doing some basic querying, checking the address if it's been reused previously, and if it's been reused, just simply say, give a warning, you can't send this transfer because this address has been reused. So these problems can also be solved on the higher level.
And I want to add one more thing, because obviously the Next Web said, why don't the IOTA people do something? Why does the protocol not prevent this sort of thing to happen? And the simple reason is it's a feature. Because there are other things. IOTA allows you to send zero-value transactions. A lot of stuff happening on the tangle is actually transporting data, not spending funds. And that specific feature and the ability to partition tangles, you can have entire subtangles offline and later on reattach those to the main tangle. That feature requires this ability. So it is a core capability, and I think, I don't even remember his name, but the guy from the Next Web didn't really get at all what IOTA tries to do.
I perfectly agree with that, but still I didn't really grasp why it's not possible to to reattach a message if there are new funds.
I would suggest in a lot of the time, and some other people asking, that we take this offline and go into more details. Yeah, go to Discord. Problem. There's the Tangle Mass channel. And on Tangle Mass, I think there are lots of folks who really dive into that question better than probably Dominik and I can do at this point of time.
Then maybe one other question, because he came up with the idea of, well, subtangles or...
Right. He came up with the idea. I'm just...
You just...
I didn't invent anything.
What I was thinking about is if you have a subtangle like that, and that is in conflict with the main tangle. And we find that out later when it's attached back to the tangle. Then there might be a lot of transactions reversed.
Yeah.
So how do I know I'm on a subtangle? Because I have some threshold when to decide when I think my transaction is confirmed. And that threshold might be completely different when I'm on a subtangle than when I'm on a main tangle.
Yeah, so I think this really goes into what we are doing right now. So we are really starting to delve deeper into this concept of economic clustering. So how can we actually partition the tangle to enable like this massive scaling? Because at the end of the day, even though the tangle right now is scalable, it's still limited to the transaction propagation, right? It's still a global state in that regard. Everyone still has to start transactions. And now what we are doing is we're actually figuring out exactly this problem, right? So how do you actually also have this kind of resolution management, right? Like if there's a conflict, then you can actually go a level higher on the network. So think about having a local cluster, like a mesh network of devices that did transactions with each other. If there's a conflict, there should be a kind of resolution management that you can go a level higher and actually check, hey, like, sorry? Okay. That's kind of weird. To check if the transaction is actually confirmed on the higher level, right? And it's actually kind of simple because at the end of the day, those transactions get them propagated to the network, and if transactions from the other cluster start referencing your transaction, then you know it's being confirmed, right? Then you can start trusting it more. Okay. So what you can do then is you can say, hey, like, I'm not sure if I can trust this transaction. I'm going to propagate it, reattach it to the other subtangle as well, and then figure out if it's going to be confirmed or not. Okay. But I think that's also more on the theoretical side that's being explored.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
Is that it?
Actually, I have more, but I want to give
send them
other
in by
people a
email.
chance.
But those are good questions. Yeah.
If you like them, we can go on and on. Who else wants to has questions for Dominik? So that's the next one. I hand over the. Yeah, you can. Okay. Yeah.
So Axel Schlosser.
Just let the crowd throw it.
Yeah, you can throw it. It is called Catchbox for a reason.
Okay, Axel. 2 questions. If the foundation is only pain, what is the reason for the foundation? Yeah, because you told only about the pain of the foundation. There should be some reason why you set it up in the first place.
I mean, that's a very, very good question. and so there's a lot of reasons why to do it, right? So let's think about another thing. Let's say that we registered at GmbH. Like super simple, get it registered within 2 weeks, costs like a few $100s, right? No pain. And now the problem that you face is now you're a startup, right? You're perceived to have an incentive, a motive, right? You want to make profits because you're a for-profit entity, right? So now think about you going into a meeting with a larger corporate and saying, hey, like I'm IOTA GmbH, please utilize my protocol. And now you're in a completely different position because now you're a for-profit entity and you're trying to push a protocol through that. And that's the first reason, right? Because at the end of the day, we want to build a standard. And I don't think that we can really build a standard if we had been a for-profit entity. But much more important than that is also like kind of like this philosophical component is that the base layer of this entire machine economy has to be open source, it has to be free to use, and it has to be non-profit. Because it's just too important, right? The potential of this is just too big, which means that we need to have a neutral and independent entity that actually takes care of the protocol and ensures that there's a proper governance framework around the protocol to actually make sure that there's no single company with vested interest pushing an agenda. And as some of you can probably guess, building standards is not about technology, it's all about politics. And there's always going to be big companies pushing an agenda, and you need to be able to fight these agendas and make sure that the core principles and the philosophy is still kept true. Which is why this concept of a non-profit foundation is so key to this. Because now this non-profit foundation, even though me and David are the founders, it's not about the founders, it's not about the people employed by it, right? It's really about this higher purpose. It's gemeinnützig, right? It's really for the people. Thank you. Yeah. So exactly. And yeah. So the good thing is also because. Sorry, can you put this?
Yeah, I can put it away.
And so probably some of you don't know the origin history of the foundation itself. So when we did the ICO, we didn't do any pre-mine, right? It was all 100% issued to the community. And then we went to the community and said, like, hey, if you want to have a foundation or an entity, like really making sure that this vision is being realized, donate money. And so then the community came together and donated like 5% of our tokens. And with this 5%, we are actually funding the entire project, right? And so it wouldn't have made sense to put us 5% in a for-profit entity. And so it should really be in a non-profit entity, because now, like I said, there's this governance framework around the funds. It's like $300, $400 million at this point. It's a lot of money, right? So we need to make sure that this is not going to be, it's not going into my pockets, basically. Yeah.
Okay, maybe another question also on the coordinator. So I understood it's necessary.
Yeah.
So, and if it's necessary, there should also be some point where it's not necessary.
Yeah.
First of all, why is it necessary? And if it's really necessary, what are the criteria? So at what point in time, what are the criteria? It's not necessary anymore. And if there are no criteria, then I really don't get it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Good question. So the main reason why, so if you read the IOTA white paper, the main assumption is that you have a large enough network for this to be self-sustainable. Because else someone could start outpacing the network and start double spending by just referencing their own transactions and building up their own subtangle. So parasite chains and stuff like that is a huge threat. Which means that now in this, first of all, in this growth phase, so the growth phase is defined by first of all, us adapting the protocol, improving the protocol, because as I said before, this is still a proof of concept, it's not production ready. And secondly, it's still a very small network, right? We need to have a huge network based on IoT devices actually contributing and participating. And we are not there yet, which means that we need to have these training wheels that actually ensure that we enable this growth phase to actually happen. Because without a coordinator, someone could attack the network, and as such, the protocol itself is useless. There is no longer any utility in it anymore. Which is why the coordinator right now is doing this continuous checkpointing, basically issuing those milestones every 2 minutes or so. And this checkpointing is there to help the network with the validation of the transactions. So it's still based on the tangle principle, meaning that if you confirm 2 transactions, you're still actually confirming them. But the coordinator is basically just assisting in this validation process. So there's going to be a blog post about that, I think this week, posted by Alon. Exactly, and the second part of your question is, when do you shut it down? Key to that is, this is not going to be an on and off switch, right? Because at that point we could just say like, hey, set up 5,000 nodes and the coordinator is gone. But it's not that simple, right? Because the thing is, there's a lot of economic theory that goes behind this and actually making sure that there's a smooth transition and that the network just doesn't break at one point. And so what's going to happen with the coordinator is that there's going to be a gradual transition phase. So right now we have the coordinated network and the uncoordinated network. And what's going to happen is that more and more nodes are starting to switch from the coordinated environment to the uncoordinated one. So think about a smaller network being built around a full tangle environment. Now, why would you want to switch to that? First and foremost, it's a full tangle environment, right? So many of you know the current problems and bottlenecks in the network. All of those are caused by the coordinator. And so in a full tangle environment, we actually have like really fast transactions happening. So you have a huge incentive to do that. So who would want to do that? Probably bigger companies wanting to just do micropayments, right? So there's a big interest in actually starting to participate more in this uncoordinated environment. And our theory, so just so you know, we're actually defining this theory and more. So this is also the economic clustering stuff that we're working on. and so our theory is that it's, like I said, it's a gradual process, but it will definitely happen sooner rather than later. And we are enabling this transition as soon as possible. And we're also working on decentralizing the coordinator itself, so it can also be elected.
Okay, so understood that there's a process, that it will not be a switch.
Yeah.
Completely agree on that one, yeah. But still, if there's no criteria available, when do you know, where do you know from it's secure to start this process or not? Yeah. There has to be some criteria. As for safety or whatever, yeah, so that you're secure.
But I don't think you need some criteria. You just need to try it out, right? So think about you participating in the coordinated environment. Now you suddenly can just switch into the uncoordinated, and you can yourself try out, hey, does this even make sense for me? Because now you're in this uncoordinated environment, and it's like a threat, right? Like if there's an attack happening, you can still switch to the other network. But I don't think that we need to have a criteria saying, hey, like we need to switch over there now or something like that. It happens gradually, and I think it's up to the community to decide on that. It shouldn't be us pushing, saying like, "Hey, switch," right?
Okay, I don't get that one. Okay.
I mean, we can debate on it. Give me a counter argument.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I try to understand, really. So I try to understand this thing, and I didn't understand everything.
But what would you expect?
But the point for me is, so I think you should be able to say, at that point in time, it's secure, not to use a coordinator anymore, and to have the speed which is able, And if everyone has to decide on his own, okay, I think it's secure enough, now I try it, and now I get an attack. This is not an answer.
I mean, the way that you're going to see this is if the uncoordinated environment is bigger than the coordinated one, right? It's just as simple as that. But like there's definitely more theory that goes into that, actually analyzing the network actively and figuring out like what is actually going on in this uncoordinated environment. But other than that, we can't just say, hey, like this is now. You have to think about this from a different point of view. So is there any security framework for any blockchain environment? Do you know how secure Bitcoin is or how secure Ethereum is? No, you don't. Because the thing is, even those protocols, even they have a lot of hashing power behind them, how do you actually take these different nuances into account? Like, hey, like how many mining cartels are there? In Ethereum, there is, I think, 8 mining farms, meaning 8 miners are controlling the entire network. So even though XYZ hashing power is securing the network, it's just 8 mining farms controlling that. Now taking game theory into account, like, what if you just control those miners? So this is not it doesn't fit into any security framework. And as such, you can't just say, hey, this is more secure than the other thing. You just have to figure out what works and what doesn't, I think. And it's like this gradual process.
It's a function of the size of the network. And the way to find that tipping point is to grow the network and transition to a more uncoordinated setup.
But one suggestion I have, because this is like a super important, interesting topic as well, right? Just join Discord and Tangle Math. And then like Sergey can probably discuss it as well. Because like this is super interesting, right? It's what we're actively working on.
I tried to discuss with Sergey and he said it's not for the average Joe. So the math is complicated. You got to throw this thing to the next...
Everyone is watching you.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt.
You have to throw it.
And please state your name just for...
Yeah, Andi Müller from near Düsseldorf. Computer science student in Further Technology. I have 3 short questions, Dom. First, you talked about it's really hard to get a bank account in crypto, right? Can you tell us on which bank you got the account?
I'm not sure if I can do that.
You're going to ask for a governed decision?
Maybe
we don't do it on record, Dom?
No, it's one of the bigger, so you can guess.
Try to catch him afterwards when we're not on YouTube and elsewhere.
I mean, the only important thing right now is that they love us, right? They actually, I mean, they just invited me to one of their events for their wealth management group, so that's really good, right? So they like us. They're not going to close our bank account anytime soon, so that's good. Yeah, like there's 3 problems right now. Like most of the companies in Zug, they don't have any bank account anymore because there's some big problems with the banks. They're just closing your account. And I think about that, you have a bunch of tokens that you can't use. And we know what that feels like because we've been there for the last 3 years.
Okay, on Discord I also have a question from the German community. They're concerned about your health and ask if you, on your throat, do you have a laugh bite? Or is it something?
I got beaten up.
Okay, thanks.
Next question.
Okay, you can answer the next question.
Why was the question about my health?
We're concerned about you, bro.
Yeah, so
you're like our Jesus or something. You know? Okay, well, it's fine if you answer the next question. We heard some rumors that there will be something released about Q and Q1. Can you?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, there's going to be news as soon as they're available. That's a very shitty answer, I know.
So, okay, I can just do
the thing is, pre-announcing this stuff makes no sense, right?
It's true.
Okay, thanks.
But is the camera that fucking good?
Yes, I hope. I don't know. Do we have? Is still anybody watching? We can. I mean, we should. We stop when the pizza's ready, and I get some sign from somebody. I hope. Otherwise, we go on unless you lose your voice completely, and then we have good reason to question your health. So we've got one over here. So throw that box to whoever sits there. Oh, there's one more. Yeah, I can take this. We need a table, or if we do this more often, we need a fucking table.
Put it on the
I can do that too. Fucking table.
Fucking table.
Yes. Go ahead, please.
We need to have like a swearing club. Just let it out. Yeah.
All right. So I'm Arvid from Aachen, and I also have a question regarding smart contracts. It's more about like the incentive to verify them. So as I can see, you will probably keep it without any monetary incentive. I don't know, but how would nodes be? What incentive would they have to verify them? So if we want to run a smart contract, would we have to verify other smart contracts, or what are other possible verification methods?
So this is one of the biggest problems with smart contracts. So if you Google the verifier's dilemma, it basically goes on about how the difficulty of verifying smart contracts actually hinders the growth of the network, right? Because what's the incentive of me to verify someone else's smart contract? So Ethereum has a huge problem with that. And I think if like verifying the Ethereum blockchain today takes about 50% more time than Bitcoin, right? That's a huge problem. Don't quote me on the 50%. I think it's 54 or so. Just read that recently. And so one thing to emphasize is that even though the IOTA Tangle has no transaction fees, I don't think that one can build a smart contract platform without any transaction fees. But what you can do is you can do this differently, right? Because in my opinion, the pricing of Ethereum of the smart contract does make too much sense. Because I think it's like exorbitantly, I think I pronounced it right, higher than the actual computation cost. So compare AWS to Ethereum smart contract. It shouldn't be that expensive, right? It should just be the computation itself and not beyond that. And there's some interesting ways to resolve that pricing issue, because I think that's one of the key things that has to be resolved in order to actually make sure that this gets adopted. But to your question, to verify it, what you can do is you can basically say that only those people relevant to a smart contract verify the smart contract, not the entire network, right? But we don't have concrete answers to that.
Okay. All right.
Throw it to the. Oh man, you killed it.
You can't throw it.
Oh.
Sebastian from Zuling, regarding to all the problems that you have to found the foundation and to get a bank account, why do you choose Germany to found this foundation and no other country?
So that's a very good question as well. So as some of you know, so I was also involved in the Crypto Valley back in 2013, one of the first companies, and so obviously everyone goes to Switzerland now to set up their Switzerland, Singapore, or some other countries like Costa Rica or something like that, set up their foundations, right? And now let's go back to what we want to achieve. We don't want to achieve an ICO. The main reason why everyone goes to Switzerland is to do their token generation event, just to raise money for tax reasons, regulatory reasons, and legal reasons. Now, we have a very different purpose. We don't want to do an ICO. We want to actually focus on adoption, which now means you have to be in a country that is best positioned to actually enable this adoption. And Germany makes the most sense for multiple reasons. First and foremost is because it's definitely one of the most bureaucratic countries in the world, right? So even though it's bad for us, it's kind of good for us at the same time, because now you really have to be properly vetted, and that really also builds a lot of trust around your entity. That's the first reason. And the second reason is because obviously the ecosystem is here. So Bosch, Volkswagen, all of the big industrial companies that we want to work with, they're all based here. So that means also that we as a German entity have much easier access to them, and actually making sure that they are also on board of the foundation. And thirdly, I think Genossenschaften, how do you say Genossenschaften in English?
I have no clue.
I think it's called cooperatives. They were also invented here in Germany, right? So it's also this right mindset that it's not just an American company profiting from this, but it's really there for the entire ecosystem, for the community, for the people. And so that's why it made a lot of sense for us to do Germany. And yeah, so we are the first ones to do it, right? And I hope we're not the last ones. But I can tell you that being a German non-profit foundation has been like the biggest advantage ever. Because then you go to a Chinese company, go to a large industrial company, say, hey, like we're a German non-profit. They just immediately think that you're like the halo effect, right? You're based in Germany, you're like it's a very good company focused with good work ethics and stuff like that, and as such, they really want to work with you. And it was a smart move.
Thanks.
Hi.
You gotta decide when we gotta stop this.
I mean, we can go on.
Yeah, I don't know when the pizza is coming. We've got time, so ask Dom whatever you want.
Hi, I'm Muzaffar from Düsseldorf. You talked last week about the supply chain potential of IOTA, and I want to ask, is there a real use case you're in right now, and what is the biggest challenge you face with the tangle on the supply chain?
Yep. So one of the biggest goals that we have this year is to really do a big case study. So what it means with a big case study is that we actually ship products around the supply chain, have a beacon or an IOTA device attached to it, and actually do transactions in the tangle, right? Because in 2018, we want to stop doing boring proof of concepts with the Raspberry Pi and actually like figure out what works in the real world. Go out in the field, right? And that's what we work on right now, is actually organizing that. And I can tell you just the logistics of it, like getting 4 or 5 different stakeholders on board, especially because it's a supply chain, is quite difficult, which is why this takes a longer period of time to actually get that set up. But we're right now actively working on that. and what was the challenges, right?
Yeah, the biggest challenge you face connected to the supply chain.
Connected to supply chain, right? So the biggest challenge is supply chain is a very difficult area, right? There's just too many stakeholders involved, and there's still too little technology everywhere. So think like 40-50% of supply chain is still based on paper documents. So now you have to find a company that actually has a connected supply chain that we can work with. Because at the end of the day, our technology doesn't work if there's no connectivity. Like that's kind of the base assumption, right? So what you can only do is you can do only certain segments of the supply chain and IOTA-fy them or whatever. So that's what we work on right now. And the other challenge, I think, is also on the security of it, right? Because you need to have a secure hardware to actually make sure that the data that's being aggregated, accumulated, is hashed in a secure module and then input into the tangle. And there's no hardware like that today, and which also means that we have to start interfacing with that. So I was speaking with some Bosch people before, and they have these really nice Bluetooth sensors that you can attach to a container or to a pallet. Now what those Bluetooth sensors do is they really emit current data, relevant data, like temperature, GPS coordinates, and geo-positioning, right? But the thing is now, because it's a Bluetooth protocol, you can only do like 12, 8, or 16 bytes, transmit them. Now, good luck doing that with a distributed ledger, right? So what we are doing right now is, so for example, with mass authenticated messaging, which is this protocol that we want to utilize for supply chain tracking, we are actually thinking about developing a more lightweight version to still enable the secure tracking of a good and have the secure audit trail, but actually make it possible to run on the IoT device itself. Right now, we're working on the gateways. We're not working on the sensors themselves. The goal is to be on the sensors.
Thank you.
More water?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Yeah, just let me know.
Hello, I'm Dennis from Duisburg, Crankycom, and my question is about the hardware part of IOTA Foundation. As I know, the ternary CPU is a big and important part in the IOTA system. So the thing is, big players like AMD, Intel spend a lot of money, like billions and billions of dollars to produce and develop these kinds of chips. So my question is, why do you think IOTA Foundation is in the position to do this kind of development? Yeah. So
first of all, the IOTA Foundation is not working on the hardware. That's an external startup called Gin, right? So IOTA comes out of the Gin startup. And Gin has been going at this since late 2013, early 2014, right? So there's a bunch of really hardcore engineers working on that over the years to bring out the first prototypes this year. So the reason why we think that we're able to disrupt it, or not disrupt, but actually enable new applications with it, is simply because of very practical economic reasons, right? The main reason why you would want to use the Trinity chip is because of energy efficiency, right? IoT is all about energy efficiency. How can you make it possible for those devices to run for 10, 20, 30 years, right? And that's the first reason why, because of that. And the second reason is because this is also going to be an acceleration for IOTA itself. So with the IOTA protocol, we can also push the hardware itself, because you want to have this accelerated hardware to actually make sure that this scales to new levels. But the thing is, the vision of IOTA does not depend on the hardware. Like, it can still run a normal CPU, and there's some very good ways to even today accelerate the algorithms that make up IOTA. Yeah.
So you mean if the development of the ternary CPU failed, IOTA Foundation would be able to just drive on the dual system?
Of course. So IOTA does not depend on this, right? It's completely separate, and we also have a very different roadmap in that sense. So there's no dependency, and the success does not depend on it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Throw it.
Yeah. Lost it.
Hello, Marcus from Cologne. And I wonder whether you could talk a little bit more about the Ecosystem Development Fund and what kind of projects you hope to support.
Yeah, of course. So what's very interesting about this Ecosystem Development Fund is that it's not like a typical fund, right? We're not doing equity investments. We are doing investments in the ecosystem, which means that we want to give developers an economic and monetary incentive to actually build products. Like, for what we are really looking for is prototypes that showcase what does the protocol enable, what can be built with it. Because at the end of the day, our individual imagination is only limited. You need to have an entire community building stuff to really showcase the entire spectrum of what can be done. That's the first thing. And the second thing, really libraries and tools that really help out. First of all, making developers more accessible, like making the lives of developers more easy by, for example, building libraries, building stuff like the sandbox, or what we've built with the Node hoster and stuff like that, right? So enabling the technology itself to be actually adopted and utilized, right? And the third thing that we're also doing is we're actually helping up with bigger projects, like, for example, bigger products that want to be released. Like, think about stuff like the proof of existence service. So now you have a product where you can input a simple hash, where you can input a document. The document is being hashed, and that is a real product that can be utilized and adds value to the ecosystem. But the thing is, it's not just about development, right? It also goes beyond that. Like, for example, what we want to enable is to actually fund meetups with the ecosystem fund marketing campaigns, anything that really helps to the adoption of IOTA itself and the awareness of it.
All right, thank you.
I'm Robert from Bonn, and I'm a developer. I'm new here in this community and just want to ask, is there something like a needs list for new developers to help, because I'm really excited to check up this API to make something great with IOTA.
So that's a very good thing. So I think some of our developers are watching, so put that on the to-do list. So needs list is definitely something that's required. So one thing that we really want to enable with this whole ecosystem fund is that people also write tutorials about the stuff that they've built, so that new developers can be easily onboarded and can learn about, hey, how can I actually build something with IOTA? But I think the most simplest thing for you to do right now is to look at one of the libraries, like the Python, JavaScript, Go, Java library, the one that you're most comfortable with. Look at the sandbox, and then just start trying out what you can build with it.
And I might add to that, there's a projects channel on Discord where you can ask for other community projects who are seeking developers and designers and talent, basically, and you can go in there and just say, hey, I'm whatever, a Node.js guy. And that's how I came to one of my pet projects. So it's really just engage on Discord. And I also think there's a channel coming up. This is still in discussion, work for hire in the Tangle space, not funded by IOTA or the ecosystem fund, but funded by companies who are like approaching us, for example, to build stuff based on IOTA. So Discord is a great place to be if you want to engage with other developers.
So one of the bigger visions that we have is to kind of build up an entire platform where people can go to and say like, hey, this is my skill set, this is what I want to do. And then you can start doing this matchmaking and then start like grouping people together and then just have this entire framework around them to enable them to innovate. So the big vision of the IOTA Foundation is to support permissionless innovation. That means that, for one, we are there to build technology, but we're also there to build this ecosystem and then enable these people to come together and just build cool shit, right? And that's definitely one of the platforms that we also want to build over the course of the year. I think that would be really cool. But it's also difficult. Work in progress.
Thank you.
Throw it right back there. Don't break it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Florian. I'm coming from Essen, and I would like to ask an economic question, not a speculation question.
Great, you're good to go.
Okay. I'm not so much into the technology part of it, but if I gather it correctly, the number of IOTA tokens is fixed, right?
Yeah.
So I think you solved some of the most important scalability problems with the Tangle. But one problem I don't understand as an economic user of the money is how do you stabilize the purchasing power of the money? Because what I do not want when I'm not in speculation is that the amount of money that I have to pay or that I receive in terms of purchasing power is unstable all the time. I want it to be as stable as possible. There might be some people not liking central banks too much in this room, but I'm a big fan of it as long as it does what it should do. So, yeah, what's your answer? How do you stabilize the purchasing power of IOTA for professional users?
Yeah, no, for sure. So this is a key question, right? This is number one issue when it comes to adoption. Because let's be honest, even though we call it cryptocurrencies, these are not currencies. So they're still like speculative assets because of it's just like huge variances in the price, and that means now, hey, like I have a Volkswagen vehicle, I have an IOTA wallet there. Today I have 10 tokens that are worth 10 euros, tomorrow they're worth like 8 euros, right? Now I, as an end consumer, I'm suddenly exposed to this volatility, and I don't know, like, hey, like what's the point of this? I can purchase less electricity. It's like, what the fuck, right? And so there's some different ways that we are thinking about going to do this. So I don't think that stable coins will survive. So that's a different reason. But I do think that what we can enable is to build up this entire financial infrastructure around IOTA. So during a presentation in London, I just recently said that it's quite ridiculous that all of the Bitcoin maximalists hate so much on banks, because banks are really important for the adoption of this. So similarly to how ISPs were the gateways to the internet, I think that banks and other financial institutions are going to be the gateways to this new crypto economies, right? That means now what you need to enable is to have a very efficient system to have a euro wallet in your car and be able to exchange these euro tokens into IOTA tokens on the spot and then transfer the tokens, IOTA tokens themselves to another machine. And that's something that we're actively thinking about how we can go about doing that. And there's even a more interesting component to that now when you start working with central banks. So we are now also starting to work with some central banks. And now if you make it possible to have entire national currencies on the Tangle or on another distributed ledger, and you actually have this direct interoperability like atomic swaps, then you can really enable this very efficient transactional settlement system. But this is not just a problem unique to IOTA. Like it's really for all of the cryptocurrencies, and nobody has solved it yet. But it's a very, very interesting issue.
Yeah. So if I understand you correctly, your recommendation is to keep IOTA as shortly as possible, so to reduce your risk.
So it's not just. This is again going to be a transition phase. So it's again going to be a transition phase. But no, so it's definitely exactly like you don't want to expose a machine or a human to this volatility, which means that the best way to do that is simply buy and sell constantly. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, we want to build an economy out of this, and the actors within that economy what they are mostly interested in is to cover all of their costs. So machine is going to receive 10 tokens. It only has 3 tokens costs. It's going to sell those 3 tokens. The other 7 it's going to keep, right? And as such, those machines are going to build up their own reserves. And through that, the whole point is obviously that we are no longer going to see these fluctuations, but really stable growth of the entire network. Yeah. But these are all just assumptions, right?
But I love it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, but so this was my vision back in 2013 because I really wanted to build a bank. And yeah, no, seriously.
I've read that.
yeah, because I think this is really required to build a sort of machine bank in this entire environment. Yeah.
Okay, my name is Daria from Bonn. Just I want to ask one question about flash channels in IOTA.
Yep.
So for current state of the flash channels in IOTA, for how long can I open it and make it running? How many transactions? And also what are the security considerations are around these flash channels, because it's completely off-chain, off-tangle, what makes it interesting. Yeah.
Very good, very good correction. So to be totally honest with you, I don't know. I'm not the flash channel expert. I can answer some of those questions. Sorry. So the security is obviously that you're doing this bidirectionally. Right? One party signs, the other party signs. And it's as simple as that. And you can do this for as long as you want, right? The only thing that happens then is that the complexity of actually going back into the tangle increases because you have to attach more bundles. If you looked at how we've explained how flash channels works, and that's basically the main hiccup here. I don't think that there's any security degradation that's going to happen with flash channels, but again, this is something that you should probably discuss with the developers, like Louis or someone like that. Yeah. But they can already be used today quite well. So I think one more question before I'm going to die.
Yeah, before we kill you on camera.
I guess I have the last question. Okay, cool.
No pressure.
I wanted to. Oh, thank you. I wanted to ask you if you are afraid that that being a Genossenschaft in Germany, like this corporation, would like take a lot of the pace, because it takes a lot of documents, and moving forward could be like in this space could make you really slow. Are you afraid of that? Because I personally would be, because I think in Germany we have like a lot of governance stuff, and people are afraid of cryptocurrencies, because for a lot of people, IOTA will be first of all cryptocurrency, and then people are like really afraid of it.
No, of course. So this was my first slide, right? So we need to be properly set up. We need to set up this entire framework of actually documenting everything, setting up this entire infrastructure behind, and we're not there yet. Which means that over the last few months, we've been like really being this like very Schrödinger's cat kind of organization. We were kind of alive, kind of not alive, right? So some components worked, some components didn't work. But what we said, just like, fuck it, we will just like make sure that we still can run at 200 kilometers per hour. So we also said, like, we're just going to fund most of it ourselves. So we're still paying some of the stuff ourselves out of our own pockets, simply to get things running, right? The IOTA Foundation still hasn't even paid an employee. And so even all of the employees at the IOTA Foundation that have been working over the last few months, they're just truly committed, right? That's just part of the mission, right? But I think to answer your question, yes, we're worried, but at the same time, we're making sure that this bureaucracy is not going to hold us back. And you can trust me, I'm the most impatient person. I get bored too fast, so we'll make sure that this doesn't hold us back. Okay. And it's been going, so I can tell you, it can only get better at this point, because the last few months were hell. So now it can only go up.
Okay, thank you.
All right, cool.
Thank you, guys. With that, I think, thank you, Dominik. Yeah, just leave it like that. This was awesome. We have the pizza coming up in like 10 minutes because we ran out of schedule somehow. It got off tangle, so to speak. I don't know whether you would stay in Cologne, obviously. I don't know whether you'll be around here, given your how you feel. He might be around and just let's network down there and in here and have some great pizza. It's coming in like 10 minutes. And thank you for all the good questions. Thanks.
Thank you.